Earlier today, it was announced Gearbox acquired Risk of Rain 2, and a lot of people are getting upset about this, and understandably so. But I've seen a lot of misinformation going around, so I'm going to make a quick video on what this actually means for the game. So let's first unpack the statement they put out. After years of passionate publishing work on Risk of Rain 2, we have developed a deep love and respect for the IP. We are eager to prove ourselves as worthy custodians by continuing to bring you world-class content and ensuring a bright future for this genre-leading franchise. As for right now, we're working hard to bring Risk of Rain 2's Survivors of the Void DLC to consoles. We also can't wait to share more details soon about a very special passion project that we're working on together with our great friends at Hopoo. It's a true love letter to the community. And that's kind of it. Wish we got a little bit more, but whatever. This is basically saying Gearbox purchased the rights to Risk of Rain 2 from Hopoo. Hopoo Games themselves were not purchased, and that means Hopoo Games will not be involved with the development of the game going forward. Previous to this, Gearbox was only the publisher and was in charge of distribution, advertising, that kind of stuff. Now, the reason people are freaking out is because Gearbox developed the console version, and it was a disaster. The gameplay you're seeing in the background is from the Switch version of the game, developed by Gearbox, and as you can see, it's a bit choppy to say the least. When the game was in early access, I believe the console version was developed by Play Everywhere, and from what I've heard, they did a really good job of porting the game. It wasn't until late 2020 Gearbox took over development and butchered the port. Currently, they're working on releasing the DLC for console, and supposedly they're completely rebuilding the game, which is why it keeps getting pushed back. But I want to be clear, this statement confirms two things. One, Gearbox owns Risk of Rain 2, and two, Hopoo will no longer be working on the game. That's not to say they don't have input. Hopoo said in the Discord that they might fill a more advisory role, but nothing official. Although it's implied, this doesn't confirm Risk of Rain 2 will be developed by Gearbox Studios. They are a publisher, and one of the things I know about Gearbox is they commonly outsource development to other studios, although I find it unlikely this will happen. Hopoo has said, "We've worked directly on Risk of Rain with Gearbox for years. They have the highest chance of continued success with the IP." I'm kind of mixed on this statement. On one hand, I'd like to take this at face value and say he trusts Gearbox and the game is in good hands, but at the same time, this was in response to people freaking out because the IP was sold, so this could very well be a PR move. And that's not me throwing shade, it's just in a situation like this, it's hard to know. I can't imagine Hopoo Games wasn't upset by how the console version turned out, but obviously that's not something they would talk about publicly. From an outside perspective, it's impossible to know the nuances of these things. We have a lot of reasons to trust Hopoo Games and a lot of reasons to not trust Gearbox. So when Hopoo Games say they trust Gearbox, it leaves me very conflicted. I also wonder if the problems we've seen with the console release come from the management end of things and not necessarily the developers, but I don't know. I actually think the fact that the console DLC release has been delayed so much is a good sign. The gaming industry is notorious for having unfair deadlines and overworking developers, which stifles a lot of creativity and passion. So the fact they're delaying it gives me the impression that that's not the case with Gearbox. There's a famous quote from Miyamoto where he says a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. And this is a sentiment I agree with wholeheartedly. Another thing Hopoo said in the official Discord is that they're out of ideas for the game. They put everything they had into Survivors of the Void, and they've done everything they set out to do with Risk of Rain, which is fair. They've been working on the Risk of Rain franchise for over a decade, and they're ready to move on. Totally understandable. But it seems like they're not quite done, because the statement they put out says Gearbox and Hopoo are working on a very special passion project. I've seen some speculation that it could be a Risk of Rain 1 remake, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. If Hopoo is involved, I'm sure it'll be good though. A sad consequence of this is that Hopoo can no longer sell merch for the game. So if you missed the Acrid plushie, like I did, you can't get it unless Gearbox decides to bring it back. So that's really depressing. This is unconfirmed, but it's rumored the composer for the game will no longer be involved with the project, which sucks. Chris has such a unique style, and he's a big part of this game's success. I think Gearbox will have a really tough time finding a suitable replacement. Overall though, I'm cautiously optimistic about this. I think the big highlight here is that the game has a future. Before this, I thought the game was done being developed, and we'd have to wait however long for Risk of Rain 3, but now we know this is not the case. I would be surprised if Gearbox is able to match the quality of Survivors of the Void, but that's a really high expectation. I think Gearbox understands why the game is successful, and I don't think they'll screw up what's already there, but maybe I'm wrong and lunar coins will become microtransactions. Assuming they don't, the question then becomes, is it better for the game to have no more content, or more content that isn't developed by Hopoo? And I would say having more content is better. Even if it's mediocre, we have the power as consumers not to buy it. But I think we should give Gearbox a chance. If for no other reason than out of courtesy to Hopoo Games. They've built a phenomenal game, and I'm willing to put aside my doubts until I'm proven wrong. This could work out very well. The fact that Hopoo is still independent means we can get Risk of Rain content and new Hopoo projects simultaneously, which is pretty exciting to think about. Eclipse Guide is coming soon. Sorry it's taken 2 months. It'll be worth it, I promise. So subscribe to be notified of that and to support the channel. There's also a second channel for stream highlights. Right now it's just re-uploads, but I'm getting an editor soon, so once that gets figured figured out, content will be coming out on that channel weekly. But that's about it. Ta-ta for now.